Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement 2. We have a super mini mail call and the package is right here. It's rather big. It's sitting on a little stool next to me. It comes from Avery in Pennsylvania. So hi to all my Pennsylvania viewers. I didn't prepare very well because I don't have something to open this package with. All right, package is open. Looks like we have something here with a note. So let me get that out. Some cardboard, maybe there's a poster or something like that in here. Here is the note. It says, the contents of this package were meant to be shipped alongside the Emerson TV boombox. Yeah, that was a recent submission. However, it took some time to scrounge up the items, which ended up being fortuitous with your shipping tip. Oh yeah, must have been pirate ship. I ship often through eBay, and imagine my surprise when I tried to ship directly through our local USPS, that's the US Post Office branch. Live and learn, yeah. I'm sure Avery was shocked that the price was like double what it would normally be. Here is something digital, so your basement doesn't get too analog. Growing up, my parents had a couple of computers from the 1980s they used for business, which were finally retired in '98 with the purchase of a Gateway PC. I took to dismantling pretty much any electronics as a kid to see how things worked and had a large bag of circuit boards I collected. Those old computers ended up in pieces in the bag, I'm embarrassed to say, since I'm sure they would be worth something today. I recall a PS2 of some variation and a Mac 2. I managed to recover some of the parts for a Mac 2 here. Sadly, the IBM seems to be no more. I have distinct memories of using an external 5 1/4 inch drive, which was already quite an anachronism in the 1990s. Yeah, I mean, Apple II, if you had a 2GS, you probably still used a 5 1/4 inch drive, but I think PCs by the 90s, that was pretty much it. Also, some things for your wall or display. All the best, Avery from Philly. Thank you very much, Avery, for the nice note. Let's see if there is anything in this cardboard here. This may simply be packing material. Does look like there's stuff in here. Yes, there is. Okay, we'll take a look at that. It's like from a magazine, looks like. All right, so in the box, which you can't see into, looks like we have a Macintosh keyboard here. In case these have sticky feet syndrome, which, yeah, this one does. I'm not going to put that down on my bench here because it will leave the disintegrated rubber all over things, and I have the magazine parts right there. There's a Macintosh mouse. Looks like one of the later variants. It looks like we have a little television of some kind. It's a little Zenith TV, and it's quite the looker with this interesting kinked up front there. All right, it says AC, DC, FM, AM, TV. We'll take a look at this in just a moment. It looks like we have another little tiny television set here, just a little tiny portable thing. Wow, it's missing its door on the side. All right, looks like we have a motherboard of sorts, probably from the Macintosh. There is a NuBus network card, looks like a floppy drive. Looks like some processor direct card, like a cache card, I think it is, or maybe a Mathco processor. 30-pin memory, some SCSI cables, and a floppy drive cable. And that's it for what's in the box. So let me switch camera angles and we'll take a closer look at all the stuff. All right, extricating these Mac parts, I'm guessing just through the bag, this is a Mac 2CI motherboard. What characterizes the Mac 2CI motherboard compared to the later ones or the earlier Mac 2CX, this thing actually has a 25 megahertz 68030 and the Mathco processor, which is right here. It has a processor direct slot, which is this one there, allows for, well, both this cache module here, but also accelerator cards, which can plug into that. We have an expansion ROM connector here, which I think replaces the onboard ROMs. There's room for 128 megabytes of RAM, which is quite amazing. It does look like the memory that's in here, though, is of the 1 megabyte variety. So this is just 4 megs of RAM, and there were some other memory modules included here. And I can't tell right off the bat the capacity of these. These might be 1 meg modules. They probably are 1 meg modules, although they could be 4 meg modules as well. The motherboard has 3 NuBus slots, so that was Apple's expansion interface. Unfortunately, it's a relatively slow expansion bus. I think it runs at 25 megahertz. It is full 32-bit, but if you have a much faster processor, this thing only has a 25 megahertz processor, which is right there, so it's not a big deal. But of course, if you have a faster, later Macintosh, this is a bottleneck. This particular computer does have onboard video, which is right here. There's the video DAC, but it can only run at 640 by 480, I think 256 colors. It does not have expandable video memory like the later machines, like the Macintosh that I recently featured on the channel. This thing has extremely leaky caps, which is very typical for these. In fact, this whole section of the board is the turn-on circuit, so this controls the soft power on-off, and this often gets very damaged. In fact, there's a lot of damage on here. Can I get it even closer there? Do you see all the corrosion there on those chips there? So if this is damaged, what happens is the system doesn't seem to turn on anymore, or it won't turn off, but generally it won't even turn on. You might push the power button and the computer will turn on, but it won't latch. It'll just turn right off again. And that's because of damage in this section of the board. You can also have a leaky battery. This is a lithium battery, so it can cause some serious damage over here in this section of the board. Obviously, that's not a problem here because this battery has been removed. I've generally talked about the fact that the Mac 2 Ci is one of my favorite 68K Macs. I don't know, it's a little bit of a sweet spot for me with the expandability, but yet very compact form factor. 3 slots, plus nice 32-bit architecture right on the board, plus easily expandable with an accelerator board. Let's take a look at what this is exactly. I'm pretty sure that this card is only a cache module that does improve the performance of the machine. Mac 2 Ci cache card. Yep, so we have a VLSI chip that just handles the caching, and we have some SRAM, cache SRAM, and then tag RAM right here just to speed up the entire process. Very much like you would find on a contemporary machine of like a 46 of the time. The 2 Ci I have in my office, which is one I've shown on this channel before, like recapping and whatever else, it has a 68040 accelerator in it. And what's awesome is I bought that machine off someone here locally off Craigslist. This was years ago. I think I paid like 10 or 20 bucks for it. And the person found it. It didn't work because of course the caps had damaged it. And when I got it home, I opened it up and I was really excited to find a Daystar 68040 accelerator. And that card on its own has some serious value because those cards, I think they're reproduction ones now, but at the time when I got it, there weren't yet, and they were hard to find and very expensive. We also have an Asante Ethernet card, so RJ45 Ethernet with a transceiver as well. So these are extra useful just to get your Mac on the network. Now this card here doesn't have any issues, but of course we can see this has a cap there and the whole motherboard has caps. So I'm gonna grab my needle nose pliers and we are going to remove these caps. I'm not gonna do a recap right now because, well, that takes a bit more time than I have at the moment. But at the minimum, I just don't want to leave these caps on the board to keep leaking away. So I'm gonna do the old twist method. Yes, put your comments down below. Now I did that sassy recap video and it did quite well. My key is you push down as you twist. So you grab the cap and you twist. And people pointed out when I was twisting, the even better way to do it is to wiggle it back and forth. So instead of calling it the twist method, let's call it the wiggle method. So grab, push down, and wiggle back and forth. And it's like metal fatigue, and it just breaks those pins right off, and it just leaves the crap behind, which you can clean up later. There we go, comes right off, easy peasy, and it left the little legs behind, so those pads are in perfect shape. No issues. By perfect, I mean ripping the cap off didn't cause any damage, more than was already caused by the fact that the cap has been leaking for who knows how long. So what I like to do with these boards when I don't have time to recap them is I'll just remove the caps like I'm doing right here. I'll then clean up the area with alcohol. And actually people recommended that I use some vinegar first to try to neutralize some of the electrolyte, and then clean it off with water and IPA. And then when I have time to do the recap later, I can. And it should halt all the damage that is occurring from the leaking electrolyte from these caps. Yeah, this is a great method. These are just coming off super easily. The wiggle, I love the wiggle. The wiggle's a great way to do it. Boom, right off like that. Let's get rid of you as well. You want to make sure that you never pull up on the caps until it is completely dislodged or free from the board. You want to push down as you're doing the old wiggle there. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. This one is holding on. There we go. Came right off. And that seems to be it for this board. I already got the cap off that. The next thing is, let me get some vinegar, which I have here. let's pour it on here, and I'll get my cotton swab here, and I'll try to clean things up a little bit with the vinegar here and just let this soak in a bit. I'm not expecting to see any kind of neutralization because we don't have a strong base that leaks out of like a NiCad battery. Just hoping to remove some of these, I called them salts. And over in this area, what a disaster. There is, yeah. Definitely there's like varying levels of damage you can get in this power section here from these leaky caps. And this unfortunately looks like sort of on the worst end of things. I've actually seen some boards where it was so bad. Sorry, I gotta turn my furnace off. It'll take a moment to shut off. I've seen it where it's so bad in this area that these chips here, these are 74LS or TTLogic chips, just fell off the board on their own. And back to this board. Oh, I just realized there's a cap right there. So let's wiggle that run right off the board. Just do the old wiggle, wiggle, wiggle while pushing down. There we go. That was easy. Well, it seemed to be out of vinegar here. There we go. I think this is all cleaned up. I'll just let this vinegar soak in a little bit more, and then I'm going to take this board upstairs and give it a full wash, under soap and water, that is. All right, just like that, the board is washed and dried. And did the vinegar help with the salts? I think so. Definitely, well, I mean, it's crusty because, of course, the corrosion has been eating away at this. So the solder joints on these chips is not just shiny and nice like it is over here. But it doesn't look too bad when it comes to the salts. How about the cash card? It's looking a little crusty right there. So maybe it didn't really help, or there as well. I don't know. I think it helped. I mean, I don't think it would hurt. So it was worth doing. And over in this area, yeah, lots of damage. And now the vinegar did eat away at the green crust that was on the pins of all of these chips. You can see it's sort of the original copper showing through there now. So that will potentially corrode away. So maybe if I get this board working, when I do go to recap it, I'll just use some nail polish to paint over the legs of these ICs so that they stop corroding. It could be though that this whole section is not working anymore. That will be for a future video. There was also this, which would be the Macintosh 2CI disk drive, and I see it's in the original little carrying case, or it's not the right word for it, the sled. This thing here is what clips into the 2CI case. So it's just a regular Macintosh 1.44 meg disk drive. Unfortunately, these get really, really dusty because the Mac 2CI has blow through, so meaning the power supply vents out of the case and air gets sucked in through, well, vents all around the case. Well, this slot opening is a big hole in the case and air will go in there and clog up the disk drive. Later, Apple put this kind of plastic sleeve around the entire disk drive to try to keep air from flowing through as much. If it just had a door on the front, that would have helped. And that is the way PC disk drives were. I don't know why Apple decided that that wasn't something that they wanted. We also have the little attachments that were used in the Mac 2CI. And yeah, it's a real shame that the case is gone. So let's take a look at these little television sets. So this is that little Zenith TV with the kink in the case, which kind of looks kind of interesting. Flipping this over, we have service number BT0555. I'm not sure if that's like a chassis number. I don't know Zenith stuff that well. Serial number. The stickers here are in English and French. And on the top, there was a note from Avery here. It says, not tested, possibly Canadian. Probably that assumption was made because there was some French writing on the front. But to be honest, that wasn't uncommon for stuff sold in the US as well to, you know, it was designed for both markets, therefore it might have French on it as well. So that's kind of cool. The speaker grill is on the top here and it's very subtle. Is this plastic? This might be metal actually, or metal coating or whatever, but I really like that speaker grill. Top has a carry handle, which is a nice shape. We have an antenna. The side here has what looks like a headphone jack. It's not labeled as such, but I'm assuming that's what it is. And on the other side, we have this, which is the tuning, radio tuning, and then on, off, and volume, and that's clicky. The whole thing is in really nice shape. The bottom is not a battery cover. Like I thought this might come off. There are a couple screws there, but I don't think this thing has battery capability. On the back of the set here, I know you can't really see that well, it has an antenna switch, antenna input, so internal, external. We have a couple adjustments here for contrast and black level, so black level and, well, white level, I suppose. And then we have an AC adapter here, Zenith AC adapter A9042. And actually, I think this thing probably is Canadian because look at this. Instead of the usual FCC logo or notice, we have one about Canada. Zenith Electronics Corporation in Glenview, Illinois. Model number BT055S. That's what we saw on the bottom. And then the chassis number there, 5NB6X, which I'm assuming is what you'd see if you were looking in the service manual. 8 to 15 volts at 0.78 amps. Unfortunately, it doesn't say anything about polarity. Center positive, center negative, I don't know. And the last thing of note here is manufactured in April 1985. Quick Google search, and I found someone else looking for the power supply for the same set here, the Zenith 52S. And it looks like here someone says it's a 12 volt DC positive pin, 300 watt? That can't seem right. I looked up the part number that that person referenced in that Reddit post, this 4112-300. And look at this thing. It's a Cursewit power supply. And it's just, what the heck? I can't really get it closer there. Look, it has the pin polarity there, and it's missing if it's positive or negative. For the Cursewit, the Cursewit. I'm sorry, that's just ridiculous. Here's another one with the same part number on Jamco, 300 milliamps, which makes more sense than the 300 watt that was referenced there. Either way, Jamco says it is center positive, so I think it's worth testing. I'm gonna try this out. I'll use the bench power supply and we'll start with a very low current and we'll see if this thing starts to come to life. All right, so I have bench power supply connected up to the set here. It is connected with center positive into the back. I have it set for 150 milliamps. And let me turn it on. The power switch is on the side here. And there's absolutely 0 milliamps of current draw, nothing at all. And it is getting a really nice, good firm connection on the back. So I don't think that's the problem. Probably what's going on here is there's either a blown fuse inside or the power switch is bad, or maybe there's a wire that's disconnected. Something like that. But yeah, 0 milliamp draw right now. So I know that, well, nothing is getting through here whatsoever. So that'll require some further investigation. So I went ahead and I filled out this note here. This is the one that Avery had stuck on here, and I wrote center positive with a question mark. I'm not 100% sure, and no current draw. So that'll take a future repair. And I think this set, since it's in such freaking perfect condition and it looks really cute. I mean, this thing it's near mint condition. Maybe a composite mod would be fun to do on this thing. Something on the back here to make this thing work as a little mini computer monitor. That would be awesome. Now, Avery has sent in a bunch of small TVs, and I think most of them are not working. They're upstairs in my office all kind of lined up, and there's a bunch of repair work to do there. I am not that great at repairing analog stuff, or, you know, which are these little TVs, of course. So yeah, it might be a while before I get to all those. I have quite the backlog of stuff to work on. Anyways, let's look at this next little TV here. So what's the deal with this thing? The Binoc by Sears. Is this because it looks like binoculars, so to speak? So that's the tuning dial. Unfortunately, it probably had a little trim piece that has fallen off. Then there's also an integrated speaker and speaker grill and telescopic antenna. And here on the back of the set, made in Japan, for Sears and Roebuck. So this is a rebadged OEM thing. So if anyone recognizes who made this originally, let me know. Here is the DC input. It says 9 volts and it is center negative, which is not unusual, especially for Japanese stuff, when there is a battery compartment, as this one has. And sadly, the battery door is missing for this. But typically what happens is with the center negative on here, plugging this in disconnects the battery, so you can't run them at the same time when you don't want to charge it or whatever. This also has a little switch here, which I'm wondering if perhaps there was like a battery pack that could go here, and when the switch was engaged, it only had contacts on one side. And it says dry cell AA's ×6 or the rechargeable pack. Ah, yes. Okay, so that's what that switch is for. So probably when the batteries are installed, it pushes that down and it won't try to charge the batteries, but with the pack, there's maybe a gap right there, and it allows the little TV to charge the batteries. Now, the size of the CRT is so small. So the picture tube, at least on the outside here, is about 54 millimeters or a little over 2 inches. And it's actually glass right there. And I'm wondering if there was like a trim piece that went on here, a little plastic trim piece that is missing, but that is the actual CRT. And it is just the cutest little thing. There's a charge LED on the front. There's the tuning knob, and it's geared. So if I turn this, as you can see, it's turning slower underneath there than the knob. It's not just a direct connection. On the bottom, what is happening here? Is this like a tilting bail thing? Yes, it is, with like various levels of tilt. And it is, what's this called? A living hinge? So it's like a nylon hinge that just feels like over time that might break. There you go. You can see there, it's kind of cool. That does work, and clips back in there and holds it in place. Here it is, 9 volts, 2.5 watts, model number 564. I mean, I won't even read that. That's just the Sears had the weirdest long model numbers. But there it is, manufactured 1980 in Japan for Sears and Roebuck. They didn't design this. This would be made for them, probably looked identical to the original Japanese set by some Japanese company like Casio or Seiko or whatever. On the side here, we have off, charge, and on. And that power switch, okay, there we go, it does move. It was just kind of stiff. There's a band selector, TV, FM, AM, and then we have a TV band selector, so the 2 VHF bands, which are used in North America here, and then we have UHF, and then volume slider and headphone jack. So let's plug in the power supply here. I swapped around the polarity here. It's just clipped on. As you can see there, I have the red wire going to the black wire here. So that'll make this center negative now. Let's set the power switch to on, and yes, there we go. That's much louder than I thought it was gonna be. Hey, that's already freaking working. That's awesome. Looks like we have really good deflection and really good sharpness as well. I'm not seeing any issues at all with what we're looking at there. I didn't even mention that on the back here, we have vertical hold, contrast, and brightness. All right, I broke out the signal generator and I have it hooked up, just sort of clipped onto the antenna loosely. We're on UHF channel 21, I think. If I shade this, it looks a little bit better. That bar there, that's the vertical refresh there, and the camera interfering with each other. I don't obviously see that. So it looks really good. The static is just moving around the little clip on the antenna. Sound is working. Yeah, it's funny. It looks really quite good, and it looks so much better in person than it does even on the camera there. Yeah, that's quite fantastic. The uniformity is decent. I mean, there's a little bit of linearity issues. Boy, the blanking is making it hard to see, but it's a bit squished at the top compared to the bottom. There's the crosshatch, and it looks really quite good as well. Considering we're clipped on with RF just to the antenna, I'm very, very impressed with this little set. There's color, which obviously we're not getting any of. There's the resolution chart. It's so small I can't really see it. All right, there we are, clipped on again with the lights off. It's clip is not really touching. There we go. I mean, look at that. It looks really great. It really does. That is amazing. So a composite mod on this little set would be pretty damn cool. Wow, I'm mighty impressed. Let's just see. There's the crosshatch. Yep, it's got DC restoration issues, as is normal for all black and white television sets. So the little Binoc by Sears set seems to work really well. It's too bad it's missing the battery cover, because it's sort of a, I don't know, a little bit of an eyesore without it. But yeah, look at this. It's like binoculars. What a silly name, but kind of fun at the same time. So yeah, I'm going to stash this away for a future, I guess, composite mod. We'll see how difficult that will be though, because this thing is probably completely chock full and packed inside of here. And I guess thinking about it, like what am I going to do with a composite modded little binocular TV set? I don't know. Might be fun just to like see if you could play some Apple II games or whatever on here. All right, let's move on to the last thing, which are these magazine clippings. And let's see what kind of interesting treasures Avery sent along. As you can see, we have a little bit of glare we're dealing with here, because I'm just not set up to try to record this type of stuff without the glare, just because this magazine printing from back in the day was pretty shiny. So you just have to bear with me on that. So let's start with this advertisement here from Zenith. So good old American television manufacturer. Back in the day, of course, Zenith is no longer. I mean, the brand might exist, but it's just attached to a Chinese company that bought the brand name. But back then, they were making some pretty good sets. So Chromacolor was their little tagline for their color sets. And you just have to look at the styling there to know that this is probably from the late 70s. Just check out that wood grain and all this dark wood furniture that we have going on exactly. Not to mention a completely fake simulated picture, but you know, can't really take a picture of a CRT anyways. Looking here, it says that this is the first color picture tube to fully illuminate every color dot on a jet black background. I mean, what is it trying to say there exactly? I'm not sure what they're trying to say here. Which is the first? Is it the jet black background, or is it the, I don't know, the fact that some sets don't illuminate every phosphor dot? That doesn't really make sense to me. But it looks like shown above is the Amherst, model number C6030W1. Growing up, we never had a Zenith or RCA or one of the American brands. We actually, the first color TV we ever had, well, really the first TV that I remember was a Quasar, which is Matsushita or Panasonic. And it was a very reliable little TV. I think it was a 13-inch diagonal, or maybe it was a 19-inch, and that thing never broke. And well, I watched everything on that thing growing up. So I don't know a whole lot about what makes, you know, the Zenith color better or worse than what Quasar or Panasonic was using on their sets. But we had a color TV, it worked reliably, and that's all I know. The thing actually turned on instantly, and it was a solid state set. I remember asking my father, what does solid state mean? It was sort of written on the front corner of the set, and he didn't really know either. So that's kind of funny. I know now it just means that there was no vacuum tubes inside it. It's just entirely transistor based. So here's a funny one, built better to last longer. So this is an older ad than the one we just saw. So these sets are gonna have vacuum tubes inside. And the funny thing is here, take a look at the text here. It actually says, every set is hand wired, no printed circuit boards. Now you might think that's strange, that that's a feature, but that's because with vacuum tubes, they get so hot, and then when you shut the set off, they get cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, that you get broken solder joints really easily on them. So when they're attached to a printed circuit board, you actually can get cracks in the PCB, and it was definitely something that made them very failure prone. So the older sets, like going back to when electronics were being made with vacuum tubes, they actually did point-to-point wiring. So the tube socket was installed in a metal base plate, and then there were just wires that went between everything. And that allowed for like the contraction and the expansion from different components that got hot or cold. And while you flipped over the set and you saw like all the, you know, wiring and stuff was all done by hand under there, it did make for more reliable connections or interconnections. Of course, the vacuum tubes themselves, you know, still would have issues like in the tube sockets, or they would, the emissions or, you know, things like that would go wrong. Although not saying that they're unreliable, but I think once the solid state era came around, we were spoiled by, you could have a TV set for 20 years and never have a single issue with it, when I think, and use it a lot every day. And I think that when you had old vacuum tube sets, having a set work for that long without a single issue was pretty rare. But people were used to pulling the back off and taking the tubes out, taking them to the store, and you would test them one by one in the tester and hopefully figure out which one was bad and get your set operational without having to have a service call. But yeah, I just imagine if you saw a computer now and it was like, yeah, it's designed to last longer because it has no printed circuit board and no shortcuts, and every connection is hand wired. That's just an interesting thing. And looking at these sets here, you know, obviously, I don't know, they almost look like drawings and not a real set, but it has a little pull-up antenna there, so portable units. And look at that, hand forming the leads on this, I guess a large resistor, or maybe that's a capacitor. Capacitors back in the day also had banding on them like resistors. So yeah, I mean, you have to learn how to decode those, because I don't think it even had markings on them for the amount of microfarads. It did sometimes, but not always. All right, the next ad here is for a computer here, and it's the Attaché, which it looks like this little luggable PC here. And yes, he's an engineer with his oscilloscope here. It looks like a, I don't know, HP or Tektronix there. And he's carrying around his big ass computer. Just noticing like the writing on the sign here is flipped. So they like flipped this particular picture so that he was, you know, looking the other direction, and they didn't fix that. That's sort of an unusual oversight for an advertisement. But there he is with his drafting table, and he's looking at a graph. Now, I don't know much about this computer, but if we look here, yep, there we go. Z80 CPM based machine, high resolution graphics. Interesting. I wonder if that was actual pixel based graphics or is just text based. Looks like this thing used, well, 5.25-inch disk drives, double density, but quad density. So 80 track double density disc. So instead of 360K double sided, you got a whopping 720K. Essentially the same capacity as a 3.5-inch double density disc. And 64K of RAM, of course, that is normal. Oh, dual processor design. I'm wondering if this was, it was using a second processor for the graphics. I wouldn't be surprised, but yes, it's so portable at 18 pounds. It looks like the name of the company that made this thing was Otrana Corporation out of Colorado. Not familiar with them, and I don't think I've ever seen this attaché computer. I don't know how many of these were made and how many were sold, but it looks relatively compact, especially if you look at the size of the floppy drive here compared to the screen. So my assumption is that screen was probably only a little 5-inch CRT, so very much like the Osborne 1, except the Osborne 1 used a full-height floppy drive here and another one on the other side, so it was much wider. So this thing does indeed seem somewhat compact. There is a year right here. I don't know if that comes out in the camera. It's 1982. So it gives us an idea of when this little thing was on the market. But this guy's certainly way more productive than he would be otherwise because of his little attaché computer. Next up, we have an IBM ad, and this is for their Pro printer, it looks like. But this art style was very much what IBM was doing with all of their ads back in the day. So it was, you know, illustrations essentially showing their peripherals. And look at this handwriting here. In addition to printing text at 400, 100, or 200 characters per second, the Pro printer can print all points addressable graphics. Ooh. And down here in the copy, it says that the printer was under $550, and it's also built to last. But unlike that TV from Zenith, this actually has printed circuit boards. It doesn't say that, but we know it does. And down here at the bottom, the IBM personal printers, the finishing touch. Doesn't say when this is from, unfortunately. And the same thing on the back, it's an ad for Renaissance Hotel. All right, next up we have some software here, and looking at the back, it does have a date here, 1984, December, Science Magazine. So we got Lab Tech Notebooks, PC data acquisition and analysis without programming. Looks like we have some software here that runs on IBM PC XT, AT, or compatibles like Compact, and the DEC Rainbow even. Ooh, that comes out later in the first quarter of 85. And it looks like some useful software that does some data capture and acquisition, real-time multitasking, turns the PC into an electronic chart, recorder, and data logger. Wonder what inputs it's using for that. It just shows some software over here, no hardware. Looks like you can export the data from the acquisition into Lotus 123, so you can do some charting in that and data analysis, which is pretty sweet. And this software was made by Laboratory Technologies Corporation out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. All right, next up we have an ad here for some kind of, I guess, like mainframe something or other. The CSPA, the array processors, mainframe processor something, the MAP 6420, and there's like a picture of a microwave there. Don't quite know what they're trying to show. I guess just a size comparison to whatever this is. Looks like this comes from the company CSPI, out of also Massachusetts. Looks like it's the advertising the MAP 6420 array processor for only the economical price of $100,000. It says the basic configuration here comes with 4 megabytes of RAM, and I guess that's the processor right there. Unless that is the RAM. Data memory can be expanded to 64 megabytes to handle even the most demanding applications. MAP was designed with a low component count that results in high reliability. More about the reliability. But yeah, it seems like this MAP 6040 processor is extremely economical. And as you can see, it is 64-bit computing. Now, again, I don't know if this is the processor and that is the RAM, or is that the processor and the RAM? But what I don't know, oh, wait, there's a date right here. Also, same edition of Science Magazine, 1984. So there we go, 64-bit computing in 1984 was a possibility for only the economical price of $100,000. And I mean, who knows what you needed to actually make that work? You know, maybe you had to plug it into the rest of the computer, and that this was just the processor. All right, next up we have, it's a Sony ad here for a little Sony Trinitron TV. The beauty of one gun. Trinitron's unique one gun, one lens system has yet to be equaled. The set here is the KV1722 17-inch TV space-saving cabinet. And, you know, Sony made a whole line of this style of cabinet, you know, into the digital era where, well, I don't mean digital TV, but where the tuner was digital down in the bottom here. So the picture tube was up at the top, and just, it made the set less wide because typically the tuner was always installed on the side here. So that's just this configuration that Sony, I don't know, I wouldn't say they pioneered it, but they certainly sold a lot of sets with this style. I love the copy here. First television was invented, then color television, then Trinitron, registered trademark of Sony. I have to imagine when people who were looking at regular color televisions back in the late 60s and into the 70s first saw Trinitron TVs, they probably were amazed because the picture brightness, the color, everything that comes out of these just looks super amazing. And that's, of course, the aperture grille mask versus that shadow mask that we saw in that Zenith ad, where a lot more of the emissions from the cathodes are blocked by the shadow mask. The aperture grille just has those thin wires and does have those guard wires that go across to, I don't know, damp the vibration. So that is the one negative of the Trinitron. But for so long, until the patents ran out, I mean, this CRT technology was really quite an amazing thing. And actually, look, it goes on to talk about that. The aperture grille, you have a brighter picture, it's sharper, it's better focused, and it's all solid state. So even the first Trinitron TV, which I think came out in the US in 1969, a little color set, was entirely transistor based, so no tubes. And that can't be said for a lot of US or domestic made televisions that were using tubes well into the 70s. Sometimes they'd have like a combination of some solid state stuff, but for the high power transistors that drove the high voltage and horizontal deflection, they were still using tubes for quite a while. Looks like if you have questions, you can get Sony to send you a 12-page Trinitron pamphlet. And then there's that old tagline, it's a Sony, which they ended up sticking on their TVs for who knows how long. Now, I have to say, talking about Trinitrons and televisions growing up, when I was about 11, so we're talking around 1986, we had a 19-inch Sony Trinitron TV. That was the main TV in the house. We only had just the one. And that is what I did all my TV watching on. And that set was something that my parents actually picked up secondhand or used off of like the little classified ads locally. So I'm sure they saved quite a bit of money on it. That set was around from 1978 or 79. And keep in mind, this was 1986. So it wasn't a super old set at that time. But that TV also worked flawlessly and never had a single issue. In fact, my parents were using that set well into like the, you know, modern on-screen display type TVs, and it never had a single problem. And they didn't really mind using it because they had a cable box that you plug the TV into, and you could actually turn the TV off and on from the cable remote. And the remote for the cable box also had a volume control. So you set the volume on the TV because it was, you know, this was a non-remote set, and it would just work. And they used that forever. And eventually, I remember my mother bought a new 27-inch Sony, and it was one of the Vega TVs, that's sort of the flat CRT, just 27-inch 4x3. And I think they kind of splurged on that. So they replaced the 19-inch they'd had forever with this 27-inch. They had that 27-inch TV well into the 2000s, where they ended up getting like a 46-inch LCD at probably around 2013, 2014 or something like that. So between 1986, or no, even before that, because I think they bought this Sony actually around 1984. So from like 1984 all the way up to the probably 2015, they had 2 Sony TVs, and that was it. And they never had a single issue. And it's kind of sad to think that that original 70s TV might still be working today, and I have no idea what happened to the thing. Maybe it just got sold at a garage sale for cheap, or, well, knowing them, that's probably exactly what happened. But it's just funny to know that Sony was making some super reliable TVs, and even though that thing was secondhand and didn't have a remote, it had an amazing quality picture. And growing up, all my Star Trek watching and other sci-fi shows and whatever else I used to watch was all on that TV, and my parents as well. They luckily didn't watch that much TV, so having just one TV in the house wasn't really a problem because I was the only kid in the house, and they didn't really watch much TV except for like movies occasionally or whatever. So it was really, I could watch it as much as I wanted. It was in like a guest bedroom. So anyways, a little backstory there on my experience with Sonys. And because of that, I have like a real affinity for Sonys. In fact, before they got that flat Sony thing, I ended up buying my own Sony 27-inch TV when I was, I had moved out and I was living in an apartment. I bought that Sony TV. It was in the 90s at some point. It had S-Video jack. I think it was maybe around 1994 I bought that TV, and that thing was a great TV as well. It had on-screen menus, and I was able to go into the service mode and kind of adjust a few things to make the picture quality as good as possible. And it had an absolute fantastic picture quality, and also never broke. Ended up moving into my bedroom when I had a LCD TV that I finally got around like 2008 in the living room. So I don't remember how long I had that 27-inch TV. And in fact, now I'm thinking about this, it's just coming back to me. When I was living in California, I had that TV, and then I moved up to Oregon, and I remember thinking, I'm not gonna bring this with me. And I actually took it to like a recycling center, and I just gave it in for recycling, which pains me to think about now. I certainly wish I had that TV still, but that's what we did, right? We just recycled stuff or got rid of things when we didn't want it. And I think at that point I had a 32-inch LCD, which I ended up putting in the bedroom, and you know, the rest is history. And I still, to this day, wish I had that Sony TV. That was like the first good quality television I ever bought, actually, because I had an older Samsung, like 19-inch TV that was a really cheap model, and it was fine, but it was a very basic set. And that Sony was like the first actual nice upgrade that I bought, and had a really nice black plastic case and had good speakers built in. It was just a really great set. I don't know how many like video games I play on thing with the, you know, PlayStation and all game consoles and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of miss it, but that's my history with Sony Trinitrons. And now at this point in my life, obviously we still have some Sony Trinitrons floating around. Like this computer monitor here is one, and there's one there on the top of the IBM, but I don't have any Sony televisions anymore. I know Sony still makes TVs you could buy, and they're actually made by Sony. They're not like OEM by someone else. But I think Sony as a company in the old days was like the company to buy. If you wanted to show that you were buying a good quality piece of equipment in like the 80s and into the 90s, you got a Sony. That was what you got for quality. And it's sad that they've sort of fallen from grace. Anyhow, back to the ads. We have just a few more to get through here. So moving on to the next one, we have a Motorola TV ad. And what's funny about this one is they're advertising a black and white television, but they have the RGB thing going on here. Like they're trying to insinuate there's some kind of color to be had. But that is absolutely not the case here. But apparently this thing has a fashion award by who? Who knows? Probably they themselves. But I do have to admit that these are some very stylish looking cabinets. I don't know what year this thing is from. I mean, looking at this picture here, I guess like early 60s. It says here that this set right there is the 18th century period piece, model 17F4 16-inch TV combination. So it'll have like a stereo and a record player in there, I guess. And I do kind of have to wonder, is this a round picture tube in there? And it might well be. So they were called roundies, and the actual CRT itself was entirely round, and then basically the bezel is what made it kind of squared off, but that's why these corners look so round. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was actually a round CRT in there, although I don't know. I don't really know that much about these old sets like this, other than of course this is all going to be vacuum tubes, and I do think it's just interesting how RGB here is a little bit strangely misleading. All right, and now it looks like we have an ad for AT&T computers here. So this was that Olivetti computer that was rebadged as an AT&T, sold, well, I think it was like a MS-DOS compatible PC. And it says, yes, we do Windows, and looks like in here, it also does Unix. Looks like it's talking about using the PC as part of your larger 3B network. And I'm pretty sure that's the Unix PC that I have. The AT&T Unix PC is a 3B. It's been a number of years. That was sent in on a mail call episode, and I have to look up when that was exactly, but I haven't revisited that computer yet. It's all perfectly boxed up and stored away inside the house here, so climate controlled and everything, for when I'm ready to revisit it. It has the Unix PC I have has a bad hard drive in it, so it does not boot. So we're gonna have to put the emulator in there and get the OS installed. Luckily, all the manuals are included with it and all the discs and stuff, not to mention that stuff is already archived. But yeah, that'll be something to revisit. But I'm not super familiar with like how this Unix environment works, and like if that PC that was shown here on this page here, does this have like a Unix type card that goes in it, or is there an OS written for x86, a Unix OS that could run on it? Not 100% sure. I'm sure there's people watching who know much more about this, so definitely let me know in the comments if you can enlighten me a little bit. And this ad seems to come from Time Magazine, July 30, 1984. All right, and the final ad here is, this is for RCA, the XL100. And again, I love this copy. In 1972, great color is no longer enough. RTA takes you behind the screen to show you what makes the XL100 more than just great color. And it's obviously showing like a plug-in module of sorts here. So it has these little like vertical boards. which seemed like a recipe for unreliability. I don't know why they would decide to have plug-in modules unless these were decided to be very unreliable, and whatever components were on here, it would be easier for the service technicians to swap out bad components if they weren't soldered onto the board or, you know, even socketed ICs. But it looks like this television here has AccuColor, solid state. And indeed here it's talking about the fact that these sets are 100% solid state and circuitry designed to perform longer with fewer repairs. I think it was the Japanese, like Sony, that basically were forcing these companies, these RCAs and Zeniths, to really up their game. Because I think what was happening, and I mean, people have to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, the reliability of the Japanese sets was so much higher than the old tube-based sets from RCA, Zenith, and other US brands that they had to try to figure out ways to go to solid state and really start to push the reliability factor. And look, it's talking about the whole same color black matrix, which I think really just means that the CRT, when it's off, is darker because whatever, there's like a tinting in the glass or whatever it is to give you a better contrast ratio. And I love this. It has foolproof color, the AccuMagic color monitor that automatically locks color within a normal range. And that's actually something that's interesting because, of course, these sets here we're talking about are NTSC, right? And everyone's like, oh, never the same color twice. And I mean, I think as far as I'm aware, old tube-based sets, that was the case. You had like drift because the color oscillator stuff was all running in the tubes. And if you had phase errors on your received signal, it didn't sync properly. So you had to like constantly adjust the tint control, which was the phase basically of the color information, which would change the tint of the entire picture. I think once we went to solid state, like this set is talking about here, it went to crystal oscillators for the color sync, and then everything was just kind of like phase locked loop, like PLL, and really locking on to the color, which brought with it like automatic color controls and stuff like that. And I think it just took away the need to ever have to adjust the tint control. It was just all automatic. And even if you had like not the best reception, you didn't really have color problems anymore. So all those like color issues with NTSC kind of went away back in the early 70s once we started getting to this type of technology. Now, again, please, I'd love to hear from people in the comment section who know more about this than I do, because like I wasn't really paying attention to this stuff back then. And what I know about how these sets work is purely from watching YouTube channels nowadays. I don't really have any experience with these old types of sets. But I do have experience with 80s sets, and you certainly never have to fiddle with the tint control on anything with like modern solid state electronics in it. Once you're using crystal oscillators and all that stuff, the color decoding just works reliably on NTSC. Now I have to wonder, is the XL100 that's advertised here the very first color solid state television from RTA? And was this somehow revolutionary to what was available before? And this seems to come from Life magazine, and there is no date, unfortunately, so I can't tell exactly when this ad is from, other than obviously it says 1972 right there. So that is it for all the ads that Avery sent in, and actually that's going to be it for this mail call episode as well. So Avery, thanks very much for sending in all this stuff, the ads, the televisions, the Macintosh parts, and of course all the stuff that you've sent in before, like that little TV combination boombox that you alluded to in the letter. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone else who sent stuff in for mail call. There's a big backlog as usual. And over the years, there's just been a lot of videos here. I think this is going to be mail call 75, which, well, this is not the 75th mail call episode. This is the 75th SM, the Super Mini mail call on the second channel. There were already a bunch of them on the main channel, which is quite amazing if I have to think about how many of these I've made. And I hope people aren't sick of watching them, because there seems to be a constant stream of stuff to make videos about. I think there's going to be the usual YouTube junk, thumbs up, subscribe, all stuff like that. Huge thanks to my patrons. Their names are going up this side of the screen right here. They make it possible for me to do this full time, so huge thank you to them. You can become a patron. There's a link in the description below. You get early access to videos, all that kind of stuff. And that is going to be that. So stay healthy, stay safe. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.